Welcome. Before we begin today's file, please consider subscribing and tapping the notification bell. We're curious. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Let's begin. The life Ilara and Daniel built was a masterpiece of textures. It lived in an apartment overlooking the Piazza Navona, where the morning light, filtered through ochre-colored curtains, always seemed to find the imperfections in the ancient, wide plank floors. Ilara, a woman whose profession was the patient resurrection of art, loved these imperfections. She was a senior restorer at the Palazzo Barberini, and her hands, smelling faintly of turpentine and linseed oil, knew how to read the stories hidden beneath layers of varnish and time. Daniel was her anchor, or so she believed. He was Daniel Ashworth, a Canadian-born consultant specializing in the provenance of classical antiquities. His work was, by nature, itinerant and vague. He met with private collectors, advised museums, and flew to Florence or Athens on a day's notice. He was charismatic, with a mind that held history not as a timeline, but as a map of human desires. He was the man who could quote Ovid on the Spanish steps and, an hour later, negotiate the price of a Roman-era bust with a hawk-eyed dealer in a back-alley shop. Their marriage felt curated, but in the way a perfect exhibition is. Evenings were for aperitivo on their terrazza, the sounds of Rome, sirens, church bells, the murmur of the crowd around Bernini's fountain, rising like incense. He would be nursing a Negroni, she a glass of Frascati. He would tell her stories of his day, the bureaucratic follies of the Uffizi, or the thrill of finding a forged signature on a lost Renaissance sketch. "You have the real eye, Ilara," he'd say, his voice a low, reassuring hum. "I just read the labels. You see the brush strokes. You see the painter." She saw him. She saw the man who brought her coffee in the shower. She saw the man who patiently listened to her endless, microscopic anxieties about a flaking patch of ultramarine on a 16th century canvas. She saw the man who, despite his command of 5 languages, fumbled charmingly with the complexities of their aging espresso machine. Their life was a high thread count sheet, smooth and comforting. It was built on shared rituals, inside jokes, and a deep mutual respect for the past. Their friends, a mix of academics, diplomats, and artists, called them the Roman ideal. They were stable. They were beautiful. They were permanent. But the defining feature of a perfect facade is its absolute dependence on the structures hidden within. The beams, the wiring, the foundation, all must be flawless. Ilara, in her work, knew this better than anyone. A beautiful fresco, she often explained, is only as strong as the wall it's painted on. She just never thought to inspect her own. The legend he had built was not just a cover, it was a work of art in itself, and she was its most devoted admirer, living inside the frame. The crack appeared on a Tuesday. It was small, a hairline fracture in the plaster. Daniel had been in Florence for 3 days, supposedly authenticating a newly discovered cache of Medici letters. This was his bread and butter. He'd called her each night, his voice warm, describing the ribollita he was eating, complaining about the humidity in the archives. It was all perfectly normal. He was due back at 7 p.m. on the Frecciarossa. At 7:30, Ilara, stirring a risotto that was beginning to congeal, called his mobile. It went straight to voicemail. At 8 hours, she called again. Voicemail. She told herself it was a dead battery, a tunnel delay. But a cold, unfamiliar static was creeping into her chest. He walked in at 11:17 p.m. The sound of his key in the lock was a gunshot in the quiet apartment. Ilara rushed to the hall, her relief ready to curdle into mild annoyance. "Daniel, I was worried sick. Your phone." He looked wrong. He was pale, his expensive linen suit rumpled and stained with something that wasn't wine. His right hand was wrapped in a crude bandage, a handkerchief stained dark brown. But it was his knuckles she saw first. The skin over all 4 was split, raw, and bruised. "My God, Daniel, what happened?" she whispered, reaching for his hand. He flinched. Not a big movement, just a fractional withdrawal. "Ilara, I'm fine. A clumsy fall." He forced a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Took a tumble down some wet steps near the Ponte Vecchio. My phone shattered. It was a complete mess. He brushed past her, moving toward the bathroom. "My God, it smells incredible in here," he said, too loud. "You saved me some?" Ilara stood frozen. He was a consultant, an academic. His hands were his tools for gentle examination. They were not the hands of a man who brawled. And the bandage? It wasn't the clumsy wrapping of a man who fell. It was tight, professional, a field dressing. "Let me look at that," she said, following him. "No, it's fine. Just a scrape. I'm going to shower. I smell like the Arno." He closed the bathroom door, and she heard the lock click. He never locked the door. She went to his travel bag, dropped unceremoniously by the door. She unzipped the main compartment, her heart a frantic bird in her throat. Inside, beneath his neatly folded clothes, was a small, hard-shell electronics case. It was not his. His was soft leather. She opened it. It contained no antiquities tools. It held a set of high-frequency ceramic earpieces, a compact listening device, and a small cylindrical object made of milled steel that looked like a suppressor. There was also a single spent 9mm shell casing, rolling loose in the foam. She dropped the case as if it were burning. The steel object clattered on the marble floor. The shower was running. Daniel was singing, off-key, a habit he had when he was trying to reset. Ilara backed away from the bag. The risotto on the stove was ruined. The smell of it, parmesan and browning garlic, suddenly made her sick. She stared at her own hands, the hands of a restorer. She had just touched an artifact from a life she did not recognize. The crack had formed, and she knew, with the cold certainty of a scientist, that it would spread. Denial is a form of preservation. Ilara spent the next week meticulously plastering over the crack. She wanted to believe the story. Daniel was effusive in his apologies. He'd been jumped, he finally admitted, by thieves who wanted his watch. He'd been embarrassed by his heroic attempt to fight them off. The case in his bag? Specialty audio equipment, he claimed, for a colleague at the university who was Annala's sold out of stock, the acoustics of the Duomo. Strange hobby, I know. The lies were good. They were smooth, plausible, and delivered with the wounded look of a man whose wife didn't trust him. Ilara, desperate to return to the beautiful portrait of their marriage, accepted them. She patched the wall, but the house kept settling. Now that she was looking, she couldn't stop seeing. The inconsistencies were threads, and he was covered in them. His past, which had always been a charming, sepia-toned narrative, began to feel thin. He was an only child from Montreal. His parents, he'd claimed, had passed away in a tragic car accident when he was in his 20s. He rarely spoke of them, and Ilara, respectful of his grief, rarely asked. One Saturday, while he was out for his run, a 3-hour affair he never missed, she went to his desk. She found his box of personal effects. In it was a single photo of his parents, a smiling, handsome couple standing in front of a distinctly non-Canadian-looking pine forest. She scanned the photo. Her work at the museum had given her access to powerful imaging software. She ran a reverse image search. The image was a stock photo. It was available for purchase on 3 different websites, filed under Happy Middle-Aged Couple Hiking. Her blood ran cold. She kept digging. She searched for his name, Daniel Ashworth, and Montreal. She found his university records from McGill. He had graduated summa cum laude in art history. It all looked perfect, too perfect. There were no candid photos on social media, no awkward freshman year pictures, no tagged photos from friends. His digital footprint began exactly in 2008, the year he graduated. Before that, Daniel Ashworth did not exist. She thought about his family. He had one eccentric aunt in Vancouver he sent a Christmas card to every year. Ilara had offered to visit. "She's a recluse, darling," he'd always said. "Hates guests." Ilara searched for the aunt. The address was a post office box. The name, Miriam Ashworth, had no corresponding digital identity. The man she lived with was a ghost. He was a curated collection of data points, a meticulously crafted legend. The academic, the charming Canadian, the orphaned art lover. It was all a fabrication. She sat back, the hum of the scanner the only sound in the room. Her husband wasn't a man with a past. He was a man assigned one. The implications of this were too vast. If his past was a lie, what was his present? What was his consulting work? What was she? She thought of her own file at the museum, vetted, known. Her entire life, from her childhood in Dorset to her art school days in London, was an open book. She was real. She was married to a man made of paper. And for the first time, she wasn't frightened of what she might find. She was frightened of him. She was frightened of the sheer, terrifying professionalism it would take to build a life this detailed, this false, and live inside it, without once breaking character. Until Florence. The human mind craves patterns. Once a pattern is identified, it is impossible to unsee. Ilara now saw the Daniel pattern: charm as deflection, intellect as a shield, and a schedule that was not erratic, but ruthlessly compartmentalized. His runs were always the same duration. His business trips were always to cities with specific geopolitical significance. And then there was the language. Daniel, the polyglot, spoke English, French, Italian, German, and passable Greek. He claimed it was the natural result of an academic life. But one night, Ilara was woken from a shallow, anxious sleep by his voice. It was 3 a.m. The apartment was dark, but for the sliver of moonlight cutting across the bedroom floor. He was not in bed. He was in his study, the door ajar. He was on the phone. Ilara had heard him take late-night calls before, always blaming different time zones and impatient collectors. But this was different. He was not speaking any language she recognized, and yet he was. It was Hebrew. Ilara had spent 6 months on a restoration project in Jerusalem years ago. She didn't speak the language, but she knew its rhythm, its guttural, urgent cadence. Daniel, her Canadian husband, was speaking fluent, rapid-fire Hebrew. But it was more than that. It was the tone. This wasn't the voice of Daniel Ashworth, the affable academic. This voice was hard. It was clipped, precise, and devoid of all emotion. It was a voice giving and receiving information. She strained to listen, her body rigid, pretending to be asleep. She could only catch fragments, words that had lodged in her memory from her time in Jerusalem. Ken, yes. Lo, no. And then repeated, Hamishkak, the briefcase, and Beseder. Okay, fine. He ended the call not with goodbye, but with a short, sharp shalom. It was not a greeting. It was a command, a period. The silence that followed was heavier than the darkness. She heard him sigh, a long, weary exhalation that sounded more real than any of his charming laughs. He stood in the doorway, a silhouette against the hall light. He watched her. She focused on her breathing, keeping it deep and even. A forgery of sleep. She felt his gaze on her, an act of surveillance. He was checking. He was confirming his security. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, he quietly closed the door to his study. Ilara did not sleep. The man she married, the man who fumbled with the espresso machine, had just conducted an operational briefing in a language he had no business knowing. She realized, with a new and visceral horror, that his other languages were not a hobby. They were tools. They were part of his disguise. French for Canada, Italian for Rome, German for the art market. And Hebrew, what was the Hebrew for? It was the language of his true work. A language of shadows, spoken only when he believed she, the civilian, the other, was not listening. The next morning, he was Daniel again. He brought her coffee in bed. You were sleeping so soundly, he smiled. Must be the Roman air. Ilara smiled back, the expression feeling like a mask she was painting on. Must be, she said. The act of violence, when it finally came, was not an explosion. It was a calculation. It was precise, economical, and utterly terrifying. It happened 2 weeks after the phone call. They were walking home from a late dinner with friends from the French embassy, a vapid, champagne-fueled affair that left Ilara feeling drained. They took a shortcut through a narrow vicolo in Trastevere, the cobblestones slick with a recent rain. The romance of the Roman night was shattered in an instant. 2 men stepped out from a darkened archway. They were young, desperate, and one of them held the dull glint of a knife. The classic ugly Roman mugging. The spokesman barked in Italian, "The watch, the wallet, the borsa." Ilara's pulse skyrocketed. She grabbed Daniel's arm. It was rock solid. "Daniel," she whispered, "just give it to them." "It's okay, Ilara," Daniel said. His voice was calm, but it was not the calm of a man surrendering. It was the calm of a man assessing. "Now!" the man with the knife shouted, stepping forward. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. The man with the knife lunged. Ilara didn't even see Daniel move. He didn't shove her out of the way. He displaced her, moving her behind him with one arm while his other arm met the attackers. There was a sound Ilara would never forget. A wet, percussive click. Daniel hadn't blocked the knife. He had trapped the man's wrist, rotating it in a way joints were not meant to go. The man screamed. The knife clattered to the stones. The second man, stunned, charged. Daniel didn't even look at him. Still holding the first man's broken wrist, he pivoted, his leg sweeping out. The second man went down, his head hitting the wall with a sickening thud. Daniel turned back to the first man, who was whimpering in a fetal position. With his free hand, Daniel reached down, retrieved the knife, and calmly, clinically, kicked it into a nearby sewer grate. He then dropped the man's arm. Silence. The entire event was over. Daniel turned to Ilara. He was breathing heavily, but not from exertion. It was adrenaline. His eyes in the moonlight were not the warm hazel eyes of her husband. They were cold. They were gray. They were the eyes of a wolf. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was still flat, operational. Who are you?" Ilara breathed. It was the only question she had. The mask snapped back into place. The coldness vanished, replaced by a believable, shaky relief. "My God, Ilara, are you hurt?" He rushed to her, checking her arms, her face. "It's okay, it's over. Just some self-defense class I took in college. I can't believe that just happened." He was already building the narrative, plastering over the moment. But Ilara had seen it. It wasn't a self-defense class. It wasn't a brawl. It was a system. It was Krav Maga. The speed, the efficiency, the total neutralization of a threat. He hadn't fought them. He had processed them. He was Daniel the academic, who supposedly got winded walking up the Gianicolo Hill. But he was also this, a man who could break a wrist and disable an attacker in the time it took to draw a breath. She allowed him to guide her home, his arm around her. But she was not leaning on her husband. She was being escorted by a stranger, a professional who had, for a terrifying 3 seconds, shown her exactly what he was. He was not a man who read history. He was a man who made it, in the dark, in the alleys, with his bare hands. Ilara's world was one of meticulous, tactile investigation. As a restorer, her job was to find the pentimento, the original painting hidden beneath the revised surface layer. An artist, unhappy with a hand or a shadow, would paint over it. But time, or an X-ray, would reveal the original truth. Her husband, she now understood, was a pentimento in reverse. The man she loved was the beautiful surface layer. The man she feared was the original. She stopped asking him questions. She became the perfect supportive wife, slightly shaken by the mugging, but recovering. Her newfound affection seemed to put him at ease. He returned to his routines, and she began her own. She began her research not on him, but on his work. His consulting firm, Ashworth Antiquities, had a sleek website and a registered address in Rome. She took a cab to the address. It was a mail drop service in a nondescript building near the Termini station. There was no office, no brass plaque. She used the deep archive database at the museum library. She cross-referenced his published articles on antiquities. They were real, but they were all in obscure, non-peer-reviewed journals. They existed solely to be found, to build his legend. Then she focused on the true physical evidence she had. The spent 9mm shell casing from his bag. She photographed it. She sent the image to a friend, a former Carabinieri officer who now ran private security. She told him it was something she'd found on a dig, a remnant from the war. His reply came 2 days later. "Ilara, this is not from the war. This is a 9mm parabellum. Specifically, the head stamp IMI means Israel Military Industries. It's standard issue for Israeli defense and intelligence services. Where did you find this? Ilara's hands shook so badly she had to sit down. Israel, Mossad. The word hung in her mind, a terrifying, neon-bright revelation. It explained everything. The Hebrew, the instant, lethal violence, the fabricated Canadian past, a classic Aliyah cover, the constant, vague travel. He wasn't an academic. He was a Katsa, a field agent. The man she loved, the man she shared a bed with, was a spy. The revelation brought no relief, only a cold, suffocating clarity. Every moment of their life was now cast in a new, sinister light. Their chance meeting at a gallery opening in London. Was that chance? Or was she chosen? His charming proposal on the terrazza. Was that love? Or was it the necessary final step in securing his deep cover? Her job, her friends, her entire life. Was she the perfect, unsuspecting background for his real work? She looked at her own hands, stained with pigment. She was a restorer, dedicated to preserving the truth of the past. Her husband was an eraser, a man who fabricated the present. The research was complete. She had x-rayed the canvas of her marriage and found the hidden portrait. It was not the portrait of Daniel Ashworth. It was the portrait of a trained operative from the Israeli Institute for Intelligence and Special Operations, and he was living in her home. Proof changes a person. Ilara was no longer a wife in denial. She was a witness, and with that came a new, cold kind of courage. She had to know the extent of the lie. She had to see the rest of the hidden painting. Daniel was gone for 48 hours. A quick trip to Berlin to inspect a collection. Ilara knew now that Berlin was just a word. He was somewhere else, doing something else. This was her chance. She had watched him, his routines, his habits. She knew he had a floor safe, hidden under a Persian rug in his study. He thought she didn't know the combination, but she had seen him enter it, his hand moving in a practiced rhythm. 10/22/86. She had assumed it was his birthday. She now realized it was probably the date his mission began. She pulled back the heavy rug. The cold metal of the safe felt like a threat. Her fingers, so steady when holding a whisper-thin brush, trembled. 10/22/86. The safe clicked open. It was not his go bag. This was his arsenal. The first thing she saw was a gun, a compact black pistol. Beside it were 3 loaded magazines. But the weapons were not the most terrifying part. The identities were. There were 4 passports. One was Daniel Ashworth, Canadian. One was Michael Hauser, German, a businessman from Munich. One was Pierre Dubois, French, a journalist. The last was Israeli. The name was one she couldn't read, written in Hebrew. But the photo was him, or a version of him. Younger, his eyes harder, no trace of the academic softness. Beneath the passports was a thick brick of cash in euros, dollars, and Swiss francs. There was a medical kit, not for scrapes, but for trauma. Sutures, blood clotting agents, morphine vials. And then she saw the folder. It had a single word on it, in English, Vestal. She opened it. Inside were satellite photos, blueprints, and surveillance logs. The target was not a piece of art, it was a person. The photos were of a man she recognized from the news. A high-level Iranian diplomat, officially in Rome for cultural exchange talks. Daniel's work was tracking this man. The logs detailed his every move, his car, his meetings, his bodyguards, his vulnerabilities. One note, in Daniel's precise handwriting, read, "Subject has a weakness for Roman blondes and Brunello." This was his real consulting. This was Ashworth Antiquities. Ilara felt a profound, dizzying sense of vertigo. The floor of her apartment, her home, felt like it was tilting. The man she worried about, the man she cooked for, the man she loved, was a hunter. He was patiently, meticulously stalking a target through the streets of her city. She put everything back, exactly as she had found it. She smoothed the rug. She washed her hands, scrubbing them until they were raw, as if she could wash off the grime of this discovery. She now knew what he was. She knew what he was doing. The only question left was who she was. Was she a wife? Or was she, by her silence, a co-conspirator? The ghost in the apartment was not him. It was her. She was the one haunting this elaborate stage set, a silent observer to a play she had, until now, mistaken for her life. The knowledge was a poison. It infected every interaction. When he smiled at her, she saw the calculation. When he kissed her, she tasted the lie. When he said, "I love you," she heard the legend being reinforced. She had to see it. She had to see him at work. She had to see the man who lived in the safe, not the man who lived in her bed. Daniel's surveillance logs, the ones in the Vestal folder, had been precise. The Iranian diplomat, Dr. Reza Hamidi, had a routine. Every Thursday afternoon, he left the embassy for a private meeting at a villa on the Appian Way. This Thursday, Daniel told Ilara he was meeting a curator at the Vatican museums. "It will go all afternoon, darling. Don't wait up." Ilara left her own work early, her hands shaking. This was madness. She was a restorer, not a spy. But she went. She took a cab to the Appian Way, a road lined with ancient tombs and the high walls of the Roman elite. She found a position on a hill, in a grove of cypress trees, overlooking the villa's entrance. She brought her best binoculars, the ones she used for inspecting high cornices. At 2:50 p.m., a black Mercedes with diplomatic plates pulled up. Dr. Hamidi got out, flanked by 2 bodyguards. He looked exactly like his photo, imperious, wary, and powerful. Ilara scanned the street. Where was Daniel? She saw nothing. Just a street cleaner, slowly pushing his cart, an old woman walking her dog, a pair of young lovers on a scooter, and then she saw him. He wasn't Daniel. He was the street cleaner. He was wearing a blue municipal jumpsuit, a hat pulled low, and mirrored sunglasses. He was unrecognizable. He had blended, become part of the city's scenery. He was invisible. She watched, her heart pounding against her ribs, as her husband, the charismatic academic, pushed a trash cart slowly past the villa. As he passed the Mercedes, he stumbled, dropping his broom. It was a perfect piece of theater. The bodyguards barely glanced at him, dismissing him as clumsy. Daniel bent down, his back to the car, and his hand, the one with the bruised knuckles, darted under the chassis. It was there for less than a second. He righted himself, mumbled an "scusi" to the air, and continued on, pushing his cart. He had just planted a device, a tracker, or a bomb. Ilara felt sick. She watched him walk to the end of the street, turn a corner, and vanish. He was a professional, a ghost. He was not the man she married. He was an operative of a foreign government, conducting a high-stakes, dangerous mission 500 meters from where she was hiding. She stayed in the cypress grove until the sun began to set, the ancient stones of the Appian Way turning gold, then purple. She was watching the villa, but she was thinking about the street cleaner. He arrived home at 7 p.m., Daniel once more. He was carrying a bouquet of white lilies. "For you." He smiled, kissing her. "The Vatican was a bore, but I thought of you." He smelled faintly of soap, but beneath it, Ilara could smell the sharp, metallic tang of his other life. The smell of adrenaline and deceit. "They're beautiful," she said, her voice hollow. "Thank you." The operation, Vestal, was accelerating. Ilara could feel it. Daniel was distracted. He was still playing the part of the loving husband, but his eyes were elsewhere. He was on edge, sleeping in 2-hour increments, his body thrumming with a tension she now recognized as operational readiness. He was making mistakes, small ones. He left his study unlocked. He took his runs at odd hours. He had a new routine. Every Tuesday and Friday at 6 a.m. he ran to the same place, the Protestant cemetery. A beautiful, quiet place, home to the graves of Keats and Shelley. It was a strange place to run. One Tuesday, Ilara followed him. She kept her distance, dressed in running gear, a baseball cap pulled low. She was getting good at this. The fear was still there, but it was now overlaid with a cold, desperate need for the whole truth. He entered the cemetery and did not go to the famous graves. He wound his way to a secluded, overgrown corner. He knelt by the tomb of a long-dead Danish sculptor. He seemed to be tying his shoe. His hand brushed against the base of a small, weather-worn angel, and then he was up, stretching and running again. He was gone. Ilara waited for 5 minutes. her pulse a drum against the silence of the graves. She walked to the angel. She ran her fingers along the base, just as he had. Her fingers found it, a small, loose stone. She pulled it out. Behind it, in a small, dry hollow, was a USB flash drive. A dead drop. This was the moment. This was the point of no return. Her hand hovered over the drive. Taking it would be an act of espionage in itself. Taking it would mean she was no longer a civilian. Taking it would mean, if he ever found out, that she had crossed a line from which there was no return. She thought of the stock photo of his parents. She thought of the 9mm casing. She thought of the street cleaner. She took the drive. She slipped it into her pocket. The small piece of plastic felt impossibly heavy. She replaced the stone and walked, not ran, from the cemetery. She felt like she was betraying him. But then she laughed, a short, bitter sound that startled a nearby cat. He had betrayed her. He had turned their entire life, their love, their home, into an operational base. He had made her an unwitting accomplice. She walked back to their apartment. The man who would retrieve that drive, his katsa, his case officer, would find nothing. An alarm would be tripped. Daniel's cover, his legend, would be compromised. She had just pulled the pin on a grenade, and she was standing in the center of the blast radius. She didn't care. She had to know what was on that drive. The apartment was silent. The city was just waking up, the sound of shutters being raised and espresso machines hissing. It was 7 a.m. Daniel would not be back from his run for at least another hour. Ilara sat at his desk, the desk of Daniel Ashworth. The USB drive was in her hand. She plugged it into his laptop. A password prompt appeared. She stared at it. It would be something operational, a string of numbers, a code name. She would never guess it. She tried Vestal, access denied. She tried Rome, access denied. She tried 1286, the safe combination, access denied. She was failing. He would be home soon. She looked around the desk, desperate. Her eyes landed on a small, framed photo. It was of them, on their wedding day in the Campidoglio. She thought about the man who had built this lie. He was a professional, but he was also arrogant. He was living his cover. What was the most important date in the legend of Daniel Ashworth? Not his birthday. Not the mission start date. The day the legend was perfected. The day he married her. She typed it in. The date he proposed. Vesta 710. Access granted. The drive opened. It was not full of surveillance logs. It was not operational plans. It was one file. A large encrypted video file and a single text document. She opened the text document first. It was not in Hebrew. It was in English. It was a psychological profile. Subject, Ilara Vance. Vestal adjacent. Status, civilian, non-hostile. Profile, high functioning. Detail-oriented. See profession, art restorer. Intellectually curious but emotionally driven. Prone to romanticism. High capacity for trust and loyalty. Assessment. Ideal candidate for long-term domestic cover. Her stability, routine, and transparent social network provide a perfect, non-suspicious anchor for the operative. She will not question inconsistencies if the emotional bond is maintained. Her love for the Daniel Ashworth persona is the primary line of defense. She is not a liability. She is an asset. Ilara stopped breathing. Vestal adjacent. She wasn't even the main character. She was adjacent. Her love is the primary line of defense. Her entire life, her deepest feelings, reduced to a tactical assessment. She was a human shield. She was the camouflage. She finally clicked the video file. It was not from Rome. It was grainy, time-stamped footage from a security camera in London 7 years ago. The gallery opening. She saw herself younger, talking to a friend, and she saw him, not Daniel. She saw the man from the Israeli passport photo. He was standing in a corner, watching her. He was speaking into his wrist. He was not an academic. He was an agent, and he was vetting her. The video cut. It was now him, sitting in a sterile white room, speaking to a camera. It was a debrief. The asset, Alara Vance, is viable, he said. His voice was the hard, cold voice from the 3 a.m. phone call. She's intelligent, but not suspicious. She's lonely. She wants to believe in the narrative. We can build the cover around her. I can make contact in 3, 2, 1. The video ended. He had not met her. He had acquired her. Their entire marriage, from the chance meeting to the "I love you this morning," was an operation. The discovery was complete. The portrait was not just repainted. It was a forgery from the canvas up. The man she loved didn't exist. He had never existed. He was a disguise, and she was the mask. She heard a key in the lock. He was home. He knew. He didn't even have to see the laptop. He knew by the way she was standing. She was not in the kitchen making coffee. She was in his study, standing by his desk, the USB drive on the polished wood between them. He didn't say, "What's wrong?" He didn't say, "Good morning." He closed the front door, the click of the lock echoing in the apartment. He slowly walked into the study. The Daniel persona was gone. The charm, the warmth, the academic slouch, all of it evaporated. He was the man from the Trastevere alley. He was the man from the debrief video. His body was perfectly balanced. His eyes were not on her face, but scanning. He was checking her hands, the windows, the room. He was assessing the threat. "The run to the cemetery was quick this morning," Alara said. Her voice was surprisingly steady. It was the voice of a woman who had nothing left to lose. "The drive is empty," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement. "It's not empty," she replied, tapping the drive. "It's full. It's full of me. Asset, Alara Vance. Ideal candidate for long-term domestic cover." The color drained from his face. This was not a breach he had anticipated. He had been trained for surveillance, for combat, for interrogation. He had not been trained for this. "Alara," he began, his voice low. "You need to give that to me. You don't understand what you're looking at." "I understand perfectly," she shot back, her voice finally breaking, thick with a grief so profound it was physical. "I'm the legend. I'm the wallpaper. I'm the non-suspicious anchor for your real life. 7 years. Was any of it real? Our wedding? The night we sat on the terrazza during the blackout and you said you'd never felt safer? Was any of it yours?" He looked at her, and for a fractional second, she saw something flicker. A ghost. A man she had known. "My name," he said, "is not Daniel." "I know," she whispered. "I am an officer of the Israeli intelligence service," he stated. "Everything in this apartment is a lie. This apartment, this job, this life, and me." Alara finished for him. "I am part of the lie." He had no answer for that. He was a man of action, of protocol. The protocol for this emotional detonation, did not exist. "The Vestal operation," he said, his voice regaining its hard edge, "is critical to the security of my country. We are tracking an Iranian procurement ring for nuclear components. The man you saw, Hamidi, is the paymaster." "And what am I?" she screamed, the word tearing out of her. "Am I critical too? Or am I just the romantic, trusting idiot who makes your cover believable?" "You were never supposed to know," he said, as if that were an excuse. "You were never supposed to know," she laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. "You vetted me. You chose me. You turned my love into a tactical advantage. You lived in my life. You don't get to tell me I wasn't supposed to know. You brought this war into my home." He stepped toward her. "Alara, the drive. My Katsa found the dead drop empty. The alarm is raised. This entire network is now compromised. Because of you." He was handling her. He was shifting the blame. He was an operative, and she was a compromised asset. "You're a monster," she said. "I'm a soldier," he corrected her. "And this is a battlefield. You just didn't know you were on it." He looked past her, at the computer, at the file, at the photo of their wedding. "Was any of it real?" she asked again, her voice small. He stood silent for a full minute, the sounds of Rome filtering in, a city that had seen empires rise and fall, a city that knew the permanence of betrayal. Finally, he looked at her. His eyes were cold, gray, and empty. "The mission," he said. The mission was real, and with that, the Daniel she had loved, the Daniel she had built a life with, was dead. He had been murdered in this room by the man standing in his place. The end was not a scene of tears. It was an extraction. The man who was not Daniel moved with a terrifying, practiced speed. The moment the confession was made, the moment the mission was declared real, the apartment ceased to be a home. It became a burned site. "They will be listening," he said, his voice a low command. He pointed to a light fixture. There, and in the phone, and in the wall. He was not talking about his enemies. He was talking about his own agency. The Katsa who had found the empty dead drop would have activated protocols. "You compromised me, Alara," he said, not with anger, but with the cold finality of an after-action report. "And I compromised the mission. They will pull me, or they will sanction me." He was not Daniel. He was an operative. He went to the safe. He took the passports, the cash, the gun. He did not take the wedding photo. "What happens now?" Ilara asked, her voice a hollow echo in the beautiful room that now felt like a prison. He looked at her. He was evaluating. "You have two choices. You are Ilara Vance. You are a civilian. You are the grieving wife of Daniel Ashworth, who went for a run one morning and never came back." "Grieving," she repeated, the word tasting like ash. "It's the cleanest narrative. You call the carabinieri. You cry. You are shocked. You know nothing. Your shock will be real. Your grief will be real." "Grief for who?" He ignored her. "You are a good actress, Ilara. You have been my unwitting co-star for 7 years. You will be convincing." "And the second choice?" He pulled a small laminated card from his wallet. It was a business card for a hotel in Zurich. "You take this. You go to the main train station. You buy a ticket. You go to Zurich. You go to this hotel. You ask for Mr. Gideon. You tell them Vesta is broken. They will take care of you. You will have a new name, a new life. You will never see Rome again." He was offering her an exit. The same kind of fabricated, sterile existence he lived. "Who are you?" she asked one last time. "Your name, your real name." He paused at the door, his goag in hand. He looked at her, and the gray in his eyes softened for a moment, a brief, fleeting pentimento of the man she thought she knew. "It doesn't matter," he said. "He never existed." He opened the door. "I loved you," Ilara said. It was a statement, a final piece of evidence. He turned, his face unreadable. "You loved Daniel. Daniel was a very successful operation." He stepped into the hall. He did not look back. He moved silently down the stairs, a ghost leaving the house he had haunted. Ilara stood in the apartment surrounded by the beautiful curated objects of her life, a life that was now an evidence room. She picked up the photo of her wedding. The man smiling at her was a stranger. She looked at the card for the hotel in Zurich. She looked at the phone. Grieve or run? The wife or the refugee? She had discovered her husband was a Mossad spy in disguise, and in doing so, she had discovered that she, herself, was a ghost, a fabrication, a supporting character in a story that was never hers. The city of Rome, which she had loved for its permanence, felt, for the first time, like a city of masks, and hers had just been ripped away. If you were captivated by this story, please subscribe. The files are deep and the shadows are long.